This afternoon we're going to talk about, or the first section this afternoon, we're going to talk about the community and how important it is to get the community involved in the program with your students. And I'm going to give you some examples. That's my job up here, is to give you all the examples of all the kids. I'm going to give you some examples of how we've done that in our community. One is we went to our Rotary group, our morning and our lunchtime Rotary, talked to them about our programs, have taken students to the Rotary program, and they've talked about the experiences that they've had in their community. We now have Rotary members asking if they can take students. It was quite interesting, actually. The last time we were there, one person was saying, well, I've had 3 students. And another person was saying, well, I haven't had any, but I need some. And that was the person that came up to me immediately. How do I get kids into my place of work? So it's not really a competition, you might say, but it is really neat to see them all excited. And they do get excited. So I think part of it, it's like anything else, it's called marketing. And there's nobody that's going to market this program like successful students. So if you can have successful students going out and talking to other students, talking to parents, talking to teachers, and talking to employers about what has worked for them, you're going to find other employers buying into the program. Another organization which we have used in our class, actually, is the RCMP. And we bring in guest speakers all the time. But one of the challenges we have when young people are at work, and I'm talking about all young people, so the challenge is that, you know what, you have to keep everything legal. If something's on the counter and it doesn't belong to you, it stays on the counter. It still doesn't belong to you until you buy it. So we tried to teach our students, again through role play, what happens if you take something that is not yours. So we invited Stephanie, our school liaison, police officer, into our school, into our Monday morning program. And she was quite nervous, but I explained to her what we were going to do. I did not tell the other teachers what we were going to do, and I obviously didn't tell the kids. It was just between the police officer and myself. I just said, bring your wallet. I wasn't aware that she carries a very large wallet. But I asked her to bring her wallet because I was going to take her wallet. Anyways, I took her wallet, but I had to put it down my pants, not just in my pocket. Anyways, I had it tucked in the back of my pants. Nobody saw what I had done. And then halfway through, Stephanie said, I want to show you something. It's in my wallet. She went over to find her wallet. She couldn't find her wallet. The kids were all looking under the table. They were looking at each other. One of the kids said, I'll go and walk back to your car to see if you dropped it on the way in. Everybody was checking. And then she said, you know what? I have to ask, has anybody here taken my wallet? And the kids looked, well, no, why would we take your wallet? And as you all know as parents, what kids do when they've done something wrong is quite often they don't want to make eye contact, so the head goes down real fast. So my head went down. I wasn't making eye contact. And Stephanie came up to me and she said in front of the whole class, Vicki, did you take my wallet? And I said, yes, I did. And she said, Vicki, why did you take my wallet? And I said, because I don't have a wallet and I wanted a wallet. At that point, I gave her back the wallet. She said, Vicki, I'm going to have to take you to the police station. Stephanie handcuffed me and walked me out of the room. We got out of the room, and you should have heard the kids in the room. Mrs. Lundeen took a wallet. Why would Mrs. Lundeen steal a wallet? Well, needless to say, we went back in fairly quickly because I did not want this hitting the newspaper. I did not want this going home to the parents. But we explained to them what we had done. The message was very clear. Those young people understood really quickly, if you do something wrong, what can possibly happen to you? And I explained, I didn't take the wallet. I was using it to teach them a lesson. And they were amazing. They were so relieved. They said, oh, I didn't think you would ever take that wallet. It was amazing how they truly believed what had happened. So that's why it's important to bring in your community members And not only that, Stephanie learned a lot about our students. She said they believed everything I said. I said, that's right. So I said, you better be telling them exactly the truth. Another group that we brought into our program, or bring in every year, are past students that are now at the college, that have already gone through the program, have experienced success at the college level, and now have jobs. And they're coming back saying, you know all this stuff that Mrs. Lundeen and Mr. Grant and Mr. McPherson and Mrs. Smith are teaching you? This is why they're teaching it to you, because this is where I'm using it today. And it's really amazing how peers can get the message across, even better than we can. This is just a picture of me on one of my wonderful journeys with the kids. We're at a garden center on Quadra, and yes, there's lots of paperwork. There's paperwork for a reason. It's important for young people to realize that it is a legal document. It is something that is important for them to understand that if you're going to sign a contract, you are there. If you're signing up to go every day at 9 o'clock, then you had better be there every day at 9 o'clock. You've got a parent signature, a teacher signature. I even have a signature from the board office, an employer signature, and their signature. They know it's important work. The employer. The employer is huge. Attitudes. We're talking about earlier about the attitudes of the students, attitudes of the family, attitudes in the school. Attitudes of the employer are just as important. I mentioned earlier about the young man that we took to the newspaper. His attitude at first of all, well, how am I going to deal with somebody in a wheelchair on my job site? Once he realized that this young man was more than a wheelchair, his attitude changed completely. So a lot of that is through education. They have to understand that the students have strengths, and they're going to have their challenges. But by them giving the opportunity to have a work experience, they're going to help this child grow. Like I tell employers, and it's a really easy sell, I said, you are helping teach these kids. I said, you're just like a teacher. You are helping us teach these kids new skills. And they feel very valued as a member of the education community. Honesty. An open relationship, honest relationship between the student and the employer. It's going to increase participation and encourage the taking and ensuring of risks and ensuring success. If there's a comfort zone between the employer and the student, they are going to be pushing that student at every bend to see if they will try something new. Choice. Remember, it's a choice for the employer. They can say no. They don't have to say yes to this. I don't do no very well. I guess I didn't do no very well as a kid, and I don't do no very well as an adult. And I know my superior's been in the office sometimes when I will get a no from an employer, and by the end of the conversation, I have a yes. If nothing else, to give it a try. Let's try it for one day and see how it works. And then I'll say to the student, now it's your turn. You have to show them that they can't do that job without you. Accommodating the student. Yes, we have students with challenges. Are the employers prepared to make some changes possibly in their job site? And most of the employers that I've dealt with have been very accommodating. And by knowing the students' challenges, they can do that. An extremely shy student would not be great at the front of a store. They might be better to start out learning the stock before they go to the front of the store. Safe learning environment. That is number one, should be number one actually on my list. It has to be safe for the student. All of our job sites are checked over by myself or one of the teachers, one of the other career facilitators, to make sure that it is a safe learning environment for our students. If a student needs special equipment, we make sure that the job site is comfortable with that special equipment, whether it be a wheelchair or some other augmentative technology. Also, with many of our students, We will give them the opportunity to practice the skill before they go in, so that they know the challenges that they are going to be faced with. Challenge. Tasks that become progressively more challenging. Graham again comes up. Like I said, Graham and Miles have taught us so much about what we need to teach. Graham was at Matt's store, and the EA came back after one day and said, Vicki, he's pushing him. He says, I just don't think he can do that, the job. And I said, well, have you talked to Graham about it? He says, well, you know what, I don't, because I don't want him to feel badly if he can't do the job. I said, well, let's ask Graham if he'd like to try the job. So we did, and one of the photos, I'm not sure if we're showing it today, but one of the best photos I have of Graham is him doing the job that the employer had asked him to do. And he said, you know, I could hire him to do the job. And that was pricing, using the machine to price the products in the store. It was at a corner store. And that's something that Graham could actually do. So we have to remember not to hold back these kids. Yes, they might try things, and you know what? It was more challenging. I'm not sure I'm quite ready for that, but we're not going to know that unless we offer them the opportunity. So we have to explore new skills, and they have to be encouraged. And then maintain the regular workday. So often I get from employers, oh, Vicki, I'm so excited to have the kids. We'll have a great day. I'll make it special. Please don't. I want them to find out what a real work day looks like. If there's some job of cleaning out a washroom and that's part of the job, guess what? Our kids are going to be doing it as well. If there's sweeping the floor, if it means a broom, our kids are doing it. Please don't give them all the fun things that go with the job. They have to know what the whole job entails. Like I keep on saying, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Employer responsibility. Safe, meaningful, and work experience for the students. What I have said in the last 3 slides is for every single student in our school district. This is no different than what I would tell any student or any employer. I expect all employers to provide an outline of their expectations. What time do you want them there? And that's different than what time do they start work. I know that when I've had different jobs in the past, that if my job started at 9 o'clock, I was there at 10 to 9, ready to start at 9. I'm not walking in the door at 9 o'clock. This is all explained to our students. What to wear. Again, we assist if there's problems with dress. But I have a rule, and I'm really tough with dress, what people are going to wear on the job site. I'm quite strict with that. I think it's really important that you do dress appropriately. And yes, I get giggles from all of them. I have a standard line, no belly, no bosom, no armpits to the girls. Had to explain what bosom was. But I just tell them, that is what it's all about. You can't dress like you're going to class if you're going to go to the job site. I always wear a jacket, because quite often they're wearing my jacket because they haven't dressed appropriately. I've even driven kids home so that they are dressed appropriately. And if they don't have clothes, quite often they'll share with a friend. To assist a student in completing the safety questionnaire, all of our students must fill out a safety questionnaire, and these are questions that are actually asked by WCB if there was an injury. They need to know who is the first aid person on the job site. Our kids have to know that too. They may have an EA with them. What happens if that EA falls, trips, gets sick? Or for some reason has maybe gone to the washroom and they need to find somebody if something's wrong with themselves or somebody else on the job site. They need to know where the fire hydrants are. They need to know where the exit doors are. To supervise or provide supervision for the student, the employer is going to write an evaluation. They need to supervise these kids. Our students are not unsupervised. They need to let these kids know where they should be working in the store and the different responsibilities that they're going to have. And it's going to change sometimes. And we talked about routine earlier. Routines are really important. But kids have to learn what's going to happen if that routine is broken and how to deal with routine if there's a change. They might have to do a job in a kitchen, and suddenly a machine's broken down, or they can't use the big machine to wash the dishes, they now have to do them by hand or some other method. Okay, how are we going to deal with that change? That's what an employer's responsibility, to help the students through that. To ensure a realistic experience, like I said, let's not make this a fun time, let's make it a learning time. And then they're great at giving me feedback, not only to myself, but also to the students. I get stopped in the street, I get phone calls. I've had a phone call Boxing Day when somebody did something he shouldn't have done at the job site. I've been grocery shopping, and I will have an employer come up and say, Vicki, that kid was just awesome. Actually, just before I left, Vicki, I need a kid. I need a student. I need an employee for the summer. Can you find me one quick? They don't need to be a work experience student. I'll pay them. So the contact with the employers is really important. And the employers, in turn, feel that they have a real responsibility to working with these students. Now, what's the benefit to the employers? Believe it or not, they are getting some pretty incredible employees. These young people that we work with, sometimes at the beginning they'll say a broom. I don't think so. But if an employer is willing to put in the time with our students, especially our students under ASD and other developmental disorders, these kids don't have a problem with a broom. They're thrilled. If an employer is giving them positive feedback, they'll sweep a parking lot. And they've done that at 7-Eleven. That's part of their job at 7-Eleven in Campbell River, is to sweep the parking lot. You should see the proud smile when they finished, and the parking lot's looking pretty awesome. So an employer is getting a pretty credible employee, very dedicated worker. Setting a positive example in the business community. It's amazing, the employers. They are so proud when they have some of our students working. Well, Vicki, I've got so-and-so, and he's been there for 6 or 7 years. We have one that was at IGA, then IGA sold to Quality Foods, and they not only gave this student the job, they gave the student the same job because routine is important. So this young man, even when the store changed hands, they kept him on. Diversified workforce. This is fabulous for other people that are working in the business. They learn so much from our students. They are willing to take on most jobs. They're willing to do what employers ask in most cases. Job coaching is provided, so how could you say no when I go up and say, I've got a student and a helper? The problem with some, actually it's interesting, I sent a teacher one day because we couldn't get an EA, so the teacher said, I'll go. So I thought, well, I'll just check to see how things are going. I went in and I had to say to him, no, the student works here. You don't. Would you please stop stacking the boxes and you go sit over in the corner and watch and make sure everything's done right. He was having so much fun. I said, no, this is not your work experience. This is the students. Like I said earlier, they get to provide input into the school curriculum. One of the owners of a pet store in Campbell River has a child with special needs. And he said to us one time, he said, would you please do this, this, and this? He said, because that's what I would like for my student, for my own child, when they get to be that age. I said, you bet. In fact, I said, that's something we should do for all students. So he's quite thrilled because we have taken some of his suggestions and we're using it for all of our students. Again, we help train the supervisory staff, and believe me, sometimes that's more of a challenge than training the kids. It is a challenge. You're teaching people that you've got to keep your hands off. You've got to let the kids do these things. Assist teachers in providing students with clear career information. We were talking about this earlier. They have to know, the kids have to know, we've placed them in a classroom. Maybe it is with the computer animation. The student wants to be there. They're talking about all the skills he's learning in computer animation. Where is he going? What's a possibility for a career in this? The kids have to know this information, and they should know this information for any class that they're in. So we encourage teachers with all kids, when you're teaching something, whether it be physics 12, PE, whatever it may be, they should be talking about the careers that are possible in those subject areas. And a good part of my job, here is act as a personal mentor for student career development. Employers are fabulous. They think that they're the gift to the student right now because they're the mentor for the student. And we think they're the gift because we have a number of employers who are saying, Vicki, did I do something wrong last time? I said, well, why? He said, well, you didn't send me a student last semester. They really love having the kids. I love to teach them. I want to show them how they, quite often it's even not even how to do a skill. It's just how you work. Believe it or not, that is a tremendous skill to have. It's not necessarily learning at a dentist's office how to drill or how to do whatever it may be, whether it's cleaning the teeth or whatever. We have students with challenges in the dental office. They're learning to work. They're learning that they're given a job and they are responsible for that job. Assess and recruit potential employers or employees. I get to find the employers and then they're finding employees. Lots of our kids are hired because they figure if I've spent this much time training a student, I want them to work for me. Like I said, with Stephen, this young man that went into the newspaper, every time he went past the newspaper, he said to his mom, Mom, there's my office. Then about a month after his article was in the paper, there was another article in the editorial, and it was the mayor of Port Hardy had written down. And he said, wow. He said, I would like that young man to write more articles for your newspaper. He said that was very powerful. So now Stephen can go and write articles anytime he likes for the newspaper. So really, in some ways, he does have a job. Hopefully, they'll start paying him for those articles. You have to know your community. Know what jobs and parts of jobs students can perform well and enjoy. And it is going out and finding those jobs. I spend a good part of my time in my car, out going through stores, finding out, okay, what could so-and-so do? These are the skills he's got. What could they do? And then talking to the employers and saying, if I had a student with these kinds of challenges, would you be willing to let them try some of these things? So it's getting to know the employers. The employers have to know their community. They have to know their students. Like Catherine said earlier, it really is a village raising these kids.
So you look around your community and you see what kind of jobs can the students go out and explore. What are their skills? What are their talents? What are their interests? And what motivates them? There are innumerable jobs that sometimes we don't think are, we're not conscious of them because we're not thinking, as Vicki said, when you walk around and you look at the environment and say, that's a job, that's a job. One of the things that, activities that we like to do with the students is have them imagine waking up in the morning, and we usually invite one of the students to come to the front of the classroom, one who's not too shy and is fairly verbal, and we walk him through from the time the alarm clock rings until he gets to school. One of the students I particularly remember was a walker, and he would walk miles and miles and miles. Rather than take the city bus, he'd rather get up an hour early and walk to school. So he was a great example because we started off with, okay, what's the first thing that happens in the morning? And he says, my alarm clock rings. And I said, okay, let's take a look at the alarm clock. Where did you buy it? Oh, I bought it at Zellers. How did it get there? And so we went through all of the parts of his morning that were connected to the merchandise that made his life easier to live. And we encouraged the students themselves to start to be aware of all the potential jobs that they themselves could do in the community. We looked at sellers. We looked at where they bought their food, how the food got there. Was it organically grown in the community? Could you go and work on the farm? Would that be a good work experience that you would like to try? And again, increasing the students' awareness of what is here that I can do or I can participate in so that I can have meaningful work and meaningful connections during the day. These are just some examples that we got. Tugboat boom boards that can be painted and put together. Hen assemblies, again, depending on your community and what's available and how much support students might need. Creating silk flowers. And these are things that we could practice in school, but we can also take it out to the workforce as well. Working in the library, huge for some of those kids who don't really want to connect with a whole lot of people and are perhaps less communicative, social skills maybe a little bit tenuous, but very, very interested in order and organization. Working in grocery stores, different parts, the sub-environments that we talked about. So for a minute, just turn to a partner and just say, you know, this is a job my son or daughter or my student could do, and I've tried it, or I haven't thought about that before.
We'd like you to take a couple of minutes and talk to somebody beside you.
And just come up with a job and some of the skills that might be required. Visual strategies. Does anybody wish to share anything that they came up with? Yes?
Well, we just talked generally, we took a specific example about Starbucks and say like a barista, and we talked about job carving, so taking just parts of that job. And you said forward and backward chaining was the term that we were talking about. So the person that you'd be supporting in the job might start by calling an order or writing an initial or just finding the different size cups and passing them along. So you'd start them off at the beginning of that, and then you'd model the rest of the steps for them, or they'd watch the barista do the rest of the steps. And if they worked there for a longer period of time, they could do more steps. And then backward chaining, is that what you call it? Yeah, so you do the final product and you'd go model backwards and just keep giving them more and more till
Excellent.
it's
Brilliant. Thank
Very
you.
good. Thank you.
Yes? Anybody else?
We have a student actually that just went to Starbucks, and this is another thing that you have to realize with a number of these people. Well, a number of all students. They want to go to a place for a very different reason than they think. Like you're thinking that, well, you should go to a place because you want to do a job. No, they want to go to Starbucks because they like their coffee. Or they're going to McDonald's because they like their food, or whatever it may be. That's the reason they're going to the place in our student at Starbucks. Or they may get to wear the uniform. Maybe the uniform that they want to wear. So it's really interesting. That can be the motivator to get them out on a work experience.
Hi. Oh, I was just going to share. A couple years ago, my son was in a very large high school in a resource class. And the teacher, who had great imagination, brought in a popcorn making machine and an ice cream dispenser. And then on the school recesses, the kids would come down to the class, and the kids were trained to serve the students and take money and make change and things like that. And
That's
I
an
thought that was a
excellent
great
idea.
training area. Then that was right in the school.
Brilliant.
And then I was mentioning to the lady here that near my old office in Kamloops, there was, I think it was started by the Society of Community Living. They started a bicycle repair and retail store, and 100% of the staff, except for the store manager, are people with special needs. And they do is they take used bicycles, repair them, and then resell them on the floor. Or if they can't be repaired, they strip them down for usable parts, and they put them in containers on the floor. And then people who at home want to repair their bikes or replace a part, you can just go into the store and shop there for parts or used bicycles.
Excellent.
But 100% of the staff are all either Down syndrome or autistic.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. And there is nothing these kids really can't do. I mean, when you put your mind to it, there's lots of opportunity for them for all students out in the community.
And we also have to talk about paid work and unpaid work, because I've had parents who come and say, I'm not going to have my son or daughter going out there and not getting paid for a job. And we've had other parents who come and say, no, I want my son to do that job. One particular young man comes to mind where he is memorized 360 pieces of music, everything from his favorite Elvis Presley tunes right through to Rachmaninoff. He can play Beethoven, he can play Bach, he can play anything you want to. And every week he goes to one of the seniors' homes and he plays for the seniors there, and he'll play whatever they want because they've learned what they can request, and it is important for him to have that job, to be out and to be connected. But it's important for his mother too, to know that all of this talent, and he did win a first prize in the North Island competitions for music when he played Mechanical Doll. He has a talent that is absolutely amazing that should be shared, and it gives him reasons to get up in the morning, reasons to practice his music, and he gets positive reinforcement because when he arrives, he gets all sorts of greetings, which he doesn't necessarily pay much attention to, but he loves doing it. It's a passion for him, and it really gives back to the community.
And it looks great on a resume.
Yeah.
Volunteer work looks fabulous on a resume.
We also have another young man, particularly the one who is working at the grocery store, and who is paid for that 2 days or 3 days a week, but then he spends one day at another senior's residence where he helps set up the bowling for them. And then I believe he has a third job in the community. So, you know, sometimes we have to balance what we can expect that our young people can do, because going 5 days a week may be way too stressful for them. Maybe they only need to go 3 days a week. Maybe they need to go mornings. I have another student who is probably 36 now, and he works 5 mornings a week, paid, to help maintain one of the shopping malls. And he has all sorts of routines that he goes through on a daily basis, but he can only handle mornings, and then afternoons he has his routines of going to the gym and biking and doing those things. So looking at a very wide view of how does this fit my son or daughter or my student.
And with Special Olympics, a number of our students are in Special Olympics, and a wonderful opportunity for volunteer work is for them to be able to help coach some of the newer members or the younger members of the Special Olympics.
So we need to look at the journey. We need to look at how do we keep track of this journey and who's involved in it and who is this journey for. Whoops, wrong way. The journey is all about the student, and we must never ever forget that they direct the program. It is created for them, perhaps with us, but we should never neglect them as a participant in the team decisions that are going to affect them as they move along into their transition. We try to ensure that the student participates in meetings for the amount of time that they can handle. We've had students who come into the meeting and they stay for the whole thing if they want to. Sometimes they're not totally engaged with us. They may be doing other things, but they may be listening, and some of our nonverbal students I know are listening, because we'll make a suggestion, we'll say something, we'll say a word, and the head goes up, and there'll be a questioning look, or there'll be a shake of the head or a nod of the head. And so never assume that these individuals, if they're nonverbal, can't participate in the process, because they are there. And when we have the students attending the meetings as part of the IEP, or as a part of the interview with the parents or the teacher about what work experiences they can go into, we can never forget who we're doing this for, because they're there. They're part of what's going on. This particular young man had a lot of troubles with controlling his energy. And what we asked him to do as he was transitioning from one venue to another venue was we asked him to put together a PowerPoint about who he was and what his strengths and abilities were. And with the help of his teacher and with the help of the parents, he put together a PowerPoint that showed him climbing mountains. In fact, this young man has climbed every mountain from Duncan to the north end of Vancouver Island. He's not only climbed every mountain, he's climbed with people who have climbed Mount Everest because he's getting a reputation for being a very interesting person to be around. When he was moving into the high school, because he's an avid cyclist, he had done a number of cycling trails that most people in the vicinity didn't know about. He started to talk about these with his friends and with his teachers. He also talked about the caves he found when he was mountain climbing. So when he got to high school, the newspaper asked him to start submitting articles. And he started submitting articles, which the next step we were hoping as he graduated, would perhaps being connected with the local tourism bureau so he could actually write up some information. So taking strengths and interests and really using them to your advantage. This young man, once he started writing articles for his high school newspaper, he would be stopped in the hallway and said, "Did you really climb that mountain? Did you really go into that cave?" So he was drawing positive attention towards him. And when he shows his PowerPoint, when he presents that to people, they don't see the person who has some trouble sometimes controlling his impulses. They see a typical teenage man who is able to fix any bike, ride any trail, climb any mountain, and go into any cave. He also has become very aware of going through this process of being able to define what his strengths are. He can also tell you that he needs medication to keep him calm sometimes, because if he doesn't have it, then he can lose his focus and attention. He can tell you what how to pre-Mac a lesson, and he can tell you why he needs to have relaxation strategies and quiet places to go to when he is feeling overwhelmed and anxious. I think that self-advocacy of teaching students who they are and how to cope with some of the challenges that they encounter is really, really an important part of what we need to do if we want to see them be successful as they transition into the world where there are not as many supports as perhaps they would have had in their school journey. I keep telling keep advising people with whom I am involved or teaching courses that we only have these students for 13 years, and that's not a very long time in the grand scheme of things. A number of our students actually have requested to do grade 13 because they want to come back and have more work experiences. So Vicki and the schools have worked it out that some of our students, after they graduate, can actually come back for the work experience component. They will come to the course that is offered at the board office, and then they will have work placements, 3 or 4 or 5 more during the year, so they get extra practice. And actually, when we were speaking in Nanaimo, Father got up and said that his son did grade 12 in 2 years because he wanted to focus on courses more intensely, and it also gave him a chance to be in a couple of courses that he would not have had the time or the energy to take, such as woodworking and drama. So, you know, using the time that's allotted and allowing for the child to do some more explorations can be a very, very healthy process. So as Vicki mentioned before, when we're working with students, we always like to begin with the end in mind. We like to reiterate, let the students themselves begin to see who they are. We like them to see themselves in pictures and in videos and reflecting upon the things that they like to do in life and the things that they don't like to do. They need to ask these questions, and we will reiterate them. What do I want from my life? especially. This came home to us very, very clearly one day when the young man who's such a pianist came into class, and he was in grade 12. It was around February, and he had just met with his social worker because he was graduating and he was going to be leaving grade 12. And we weren't at this level where we had understood that how much work and preparation we really do need to do to make that transition smooth from one environment to the other. And he came in and he was sobbing and his shoulders were shaking and he was crying, and he looked at me and he says, "I don't want to leave here, Mrs. Smith." And it was heartbreaking to see him. And that's when Vicki and Ian and I got together and started thinking, wow, we really do need to do more preparation so that when they transition and they move into the new environment, it is so smooth and so natural. It's like coming out of the cocoon and just moving on to the next level of life. And again, you know, sometimes it may take an extra year for us to allow our students to do that, but we've got to think that we know, especially in the cases of kids with ASD, that those transitions are very difficult, and we can't, just because they're big and they talk and they're very social and comfortable in the environments that we have created. We spent 13 years creating that comfort zone in our schools, and we've trained teachers and we've trained educational assistants. So to expect them to drop out of this comfort zone into something that is completely foreign to them has to have a lot of preparation in order to make it natural to just let go and move on, because you build up more and more in the environments they're going into, and so they can leave the other one behind.
I could have used some of that transition going into retirement.
So what do I have to offer the world? And celebrating what strengths and interests and talents will accommodate these young people. And what am I working on? Because learning is lifelong, and that's something else we want to ingrain in all of us and all of the people that are supporting our young people, is that we always learn. You don't just learn something and then forget about it. We continue to learn, and we can continue to keep moving that bar a little further and a little further. For some kids, it may be an inch. For some kids, it's going to be miles. So keeping that in the back of our minds. We also want them to make sure that they understand what their interests are and how this affects them, how it affects them socially, how it affects them emotionally, and how it affects the people around them, and understand what their abilities are and their values.
It's important to remember that interests are is an external motivation. You're not necessarily good at it, it's just something you would like to do. I would love to climb Mount Everest. Could I climb Mount Everest? I'm not sure, but I'd still be really interested. That's an interest of mine. So you don't have to be good at it, but that's an interest, and we have to pay attention to that. The values are tougher. The values are internal. They're intrinsic motivations. So with all of these different checklists that we use with kids, and normally in a different situation, actually, we have something that we hand out to the group and have people work with it at different tables. In this venue, it's a little bit more difficult. But it's an interest checklist and a values checklist. And anybody that's doing a career search, whether it be online or with a career facilitator, this is an experience you're going to go through. You're going to have to list your interests, your values, etc. With our students, what we've done is we've put the interests and we've put pictures. They need to see what it looks like. Because you look at, if you say the word that they, for instance, honesty. I mean, it's pretty tough to talk to a person about honesty without it being either role-played or without there being a picture. Or somebody likes education. These are the things that we have to talk to the kids about and actually put a picture beside it. And as an example, we did this with our Monday morning class. We went through our interests checklist and the values checklist, and it took us someplace totally different than where we planned on going. We wanted all of the young people to come up with their own list of what they're really interested in and where they thought it might take them in the future. And it was really interesting. What we did was when they did the checklist, we had all sorts of things. Actually, I've got a copy of it here, but we did all sorts of things. We looked at whether you like to watch videos, play games, talk to your friends, if dancing is important, etc. And we saw that a number of our students, dancing was really important. And we got the kids talking to each other, and I was sitting with a group, and the one similarity on all of their checklists was they had dance, was an interest of theirs. So I said to them, do you ever get to dance? No. But I said, when would you have a dance? Well, sometimes I'll dance to the TV or to music at home, or sometimes they'll have a dance at school. Do you go to the dance at schools? Well, no. So I said, well, would you go to a dance at school if we held one for this class? Well, that led to 3 dances, by the way, that year. And the dance was just a minor part of it. These young people then had to organize the dance themselves. We now had young fellows that were the DJs. Somebody was picked out in the class, or somebody volunteered to be the DJs. It was amazing. They did all the work. One girl had just done a work experience at one of our local restaurants, and she came up and she made these fancy little drinks with umbrellas for all of the kids. Everybody had their job to do. So again, there was an interest. It was just dance, and it took us off in a totally different direction. The skills that were learned by doing that, again, was just amazing. So these are surprises. When you do an interest checklist, when you do a value checklist with students, you never know where it's going to take you.
And remember, we mentioned earlier how when we asked students to get together and talk about their weekend, and we were met with complete silence, they didn't know each other. These interest checklists and values checklists give you a common ground so that they can begin to know what other kids like. They begin to see that other peers happen to have an interest in something that they're interested in, and it can pull out the social skills. It can pull out skills which are can be then generalized across environments. When we were working with this group, we got together with parents and we said, you know, they really seem to need to get together with one another because they were living in isolation. The only students in our classes who happened to be really having an active social life were those students who were involved in the Special Olympics. They were off all over, not just the town, not the north end of Vancouver Island, but we had one of our boys represent us in Dublin at the International Special O's, and our kids they had more of a social life than I ever had. They were off to Vancouver and to Kelowna, Banff, Calgary. They were on the road all the time. So what we actually had to do was get permission from the parents for these students to be able to take each other's phone numbers, and we made it a part of their homework. They had to phone a friend. And at first, we had to do it for them. We had to say, Michelle, you're going to phone Susie this weekend, and Paul, you're going to phone George this weekend, and then you're going to set up something that you can do together. And because we had the parent backing, we worked on that for a long time, but it became more natural for them to start phoning each other. They hadn't even used a phone. Again, we assume that maybe they can't do it, or maybe the other person at the other end of the line isn't interested. So we have to set the stage so that they can become a little more involved and a little more out there and experiencing life. So then it became a little bit easier for them to come in and say, oh, we've got a floor hockey game on Friday night. Who needs a ride? My mom's driving, or whatever. And you know, it's worked up to the point now where one of our grade 12 graduates invited one of the grade 10 girls to go to a prom this year, and it was awesome. I met her mom in the bank, and she said, oh, she's so excited. She's getting her hair done, and she's got her dress and her nails done. She'd never been out on a date before. So what we take for granted really has to be looked at under the microscope some days.
In our class, the second thing that we do after the greeting is that when all the students are seated, we then have a thumbs up. And it's interesting over the last 12 years how those thumbs up have changed. Thumbs up used to be, oh, well, maybe Brian, he was in school all week. He wasn't sick this week or whatever it may be. Now it's, Susan invited me to her birthday party on the weekend and we had a great time. Brian invited me to go to the show. So-and-so invited me to go bowling with the family. Now most of our thumbs up, the different ones that the students are mentioning, are activities that they're doing with each other.
What I found interesting about that particular activity that we started the class with, we put a visual, we put thumbs up, and we put the visual of a hand-drawn thumbs, and when we first started it, everything was literal. Oh, I like your hair. Oh, I like your necklace. Oh, I like your teeth. Oh, I like your shirt. And over the years, as they became comfortable complimenting one another, they started to think and bring things that had happened, as Vicki said, that happened on the weekend. Or at one point, one of our boys got up and he thanked one of the educational assistants because he had forgotten his calculator, and she lent him her calculator when he was in math, in grade 10 math. And I thought, wow, that is starting to make the minds connect and think and bring the past into the future, and also opening up that theory of mind that, wow, yes, there are other people who like to have these compliments and these acknowledgments in an environment like this. So I can remember listening to a program once about how one of the things that we tend to do is we compliment a lot, and this is what drove us to start doing this. We compliment people who have challenges or disabilities, or we remark on something that they've accomplished or they've done, and then we tend to walk away and everybody just carries on with life. But if we want to have an interactive society and we want people to stop and pay attention, we also have to teach these kids to acknowledge what other people are doing for them and to compliment other people, because when you compliment somebody, they stop and they listen and they turn and they interact. Again, another example is I was in the store one day and I saw Miles, and I did my usual, hey Miles, how's it going? Fine, how are you doing in school? And he said fine, and I started walking away, and he says, and what about you, Catherine? And it just made me stop. I was going to have a conversation with Miles. And the next thing he said was, can't you ever ask me anything other than how's school going? And I thought, I need to broaden my repertoire with this young man. And he brought to my attention that, yes, I can have a conversation with you and you can have a conversation with me. Just take the time to think about it and do it. So, what is my dream?
We talked about this at the very beginning. We're coming back to it. I think that every student, every family has to have a dream. And it is our responsibility in the school system to assist in helping them get that dream. And the only way we can do that is to give them these opportunities, open some doors. This is the way they're going to become a member of our community. They're going to have independence. They're going to develop some social relationships. And the bottom line, self-fulfillment. They're going to feel good about themselves. So the dream is something that we can never forget. That has to be always on our mind. Where are we headed? Begin with the end in mind, and the end in mind has to be that dream.
And again, going back to using the visuals, as I mentioned this morning, where you sit down and you actually ask the student, where do you want to be? what do you want to do? And have them respond in whatever way they possibly can, even if it's bringing pictures from home, having talked to parents and say, you know, what really can we anticipate? And creating that dream in reality. Creating the dream with the tools that are available through the school system and through parents and through social services and anything else. Knowing what the strengths are, knowing what the abilities are, so that we can make the dream come true. What are the supports? What's going to be needed in the community in order to make that happen? Have a picture of the dream if you have to have a picture. Or use words, and then go back to that sit down and regularly assess how practical and realistic the dream is. We had a young lady who was in the course who wanted to be a journalist. And so we talked about all of her strengths, and we talked about her interests, and we talked about all of the skills and courses that she had to date. And they did not match what her ultimate dream was of being a journalist. So much like Stephen, what we did was we got her into the newspaper office where she was able to do parts of her dream. And what she had actually wanted was to be around people who were reporting on the news, because she was a bit of a news junkie, and be part of that stimulation so that she felt a part of her community. So she was in the local newspaper office, and she was making coffee, and she was doing the entry jobs that anybody else would want. But after working there for a while, she came back, she reassessed what skills and abilities she had, and she realized that as much as she liked being there, that really wasn't where she was going to go as far as employment went.
Transition. I think that's why you came here today. Isn't it amazing? It's taken us till 2:10 to suddenly use the word transition. Transition, it's really important. The new transition program by the ministry is looking at your personal health, community connections, career, and life. And we're going to go into it a little bit further, but there's a lot of physical activity in there which we'll discuss. The transition plan, and I've given a mention to it, the Kitsilano. I have a copy of it here if anybody wants to look at it. Kitsilano has come up with a fabulous transition plan. And we use some of it in our school district. Because I don't do it for all the students in our school district, some teachers have chosen to go another route. But we have permission from Rainer to recommend this. And it's online. You can see his website. If you go on the website, you will see it. It is an excellent transition plan that if your school doesn't have one, isn't using one at this point in time, I would highly recommend that you connect to this one and get some ideas. In transition, one of the things we're looking at it with the personal health, 80 hours, I'm sorry, I think this is outdated. I think it's now 120 hours. But if you look at the 120 hours, the things that can be used for the 120 hours of physical activity, it's really anything goes. PE 11, if a student is in PE 11, that's an automatic. You automatically get that part of your transition. We ask students to record. Now this is really important, that as a parent, and I guess this is a good part of the parent's job right now when it comes to planning 10, is make sure that you record any activity your student is doing, your child is doing. If they're doing special O, if they're out training for swimming, whether it be a meet or they're just going to training, if they're doing bowling, if it is an activity where they are exerting themselves, you can include that in their 120 hours.
Including their physiotherapy sessions. If you have a student or a son or daughter who has to have physiotherapy, you keep track of all the hours that they're doing physiotherapy, and that can pass as part of their personal health record.
In fact, we have the student I was talking about earlier that's in the wheelchair, and he has uses augmented technology, and we had to include that because he actually has a pointer on his head, and every time he nods to use the computer, he's exhausted when he's finished. So he's using physical activity to just use his computer. That is part of his 120 hours.
And one of the things that I'm really excited about is the inclusion of stress reduction, because we know more and more as we work with students who have ASD how stressful life in general can be, particularly when they have to leave home, the comforts of home and the routines and everything that's familiar, and go to school or go out into the community. And so we are constantly stressing how important it is to teach these individuals methods for reducing the stress that they're experiencing, recognizing those signs that show up, that tell us that they're going to start to melt down or start to tune out or start to just not be a part of what's going on because they're fighting the stress that they're under. And developing stress reduction plans by deep breathing, by going to a quiet place, by visualization, can now be used as a part of their transition plan for graduation. So when I'm talking about needing stress reduction plans and needing relaxation therapy programs in grade 4, grade 5 for one of my students, I now say, and do you know that in order to graduate successfully in BC now, all students have to have a stress reduction plan. And I've got whole classrooms who are starting to use some of these techniques that June Groden and her colleagues have developed, as well as others in the field. So
we work very closely with our physiotherapists and occupational therapists, and they make sure that we are aware of what students are doing, so we in turn can connect with teachers, and we also let them know what is acceptable. That's where, again, we have to work very closely as a team. Community connections. I think one of our fun stories, if you want to share the story about Paul. I think he's just, this is a young man, the young man that also went to the national level for Special Olympics.
And the international level.
Yeah.
He's the one who went to Dublin. And this is a real story about Asperger's. He got into the pool in Dublin, and it was different from the pool in Campbell River, and he froze. He had been to pools in Victoria and Calgary and other places, but this one was really different because I think it had a step down. And all of a sudden he froze, and they thought, oh my goodness, he's not going to be able to compete. So they got the cell phone out, woke the coach up, who hadn't been able to make it because of personal commitments at home, over which he had no control, woke him up in the middle of the night and said, we can't get him into the pool. And he gave them a script that he had used successfully with Paul, and he got into the pool. But community connections, Paul is now, because he is one of our gold medal athletes who is very well respected in the community and whose family has been so supportive over the years, is one of the stars for our golf tournament to help raise funds for students who need it in the or students and young adults in the Campbell River community. And so people actually bid on who they're going to have to caddy for them. And every year he raises tons and tons of money, and he loves it. He's part of the community. He participates in Special Olympics. He participates in fundraising. He volunteers at senior centers, and he's just a very, very vibrant part of our whole community. So his 30 hours of work experience and/or community service were done very quickly. We look at career and life. What we want students to be able to do is to learn how to reflect on what they've done, what they've experienced, and where they want to go next. We want them to be able to do that either verbally or using some sort of visual supports that will allow them to foster that reflection. We were working together with a team from Nanaimo, a team of teachers who were represented all the high schools in Nanaimo as we were working through the graduation portfolio. And of course, there's always the question that, well, what do we do about the students who are really, really, really unable to communicate that? And we worked with the speech and language therapists, and we worked with the teachers so that we developed a system of pictures that the students could access and be able to make a decision between, I like this better than this, I like this, I don't like this, so that we had a communication that allowed them to have some participation in where they wanted to go, what they wanted to present, and what they wanted to do. We were working with one girl who had no communication. Her only way of communicating was through the technology that BC had set up, and she would use her head left to activate the technology, or use her head to bump something that created the technology. And out of that, we had a whole portfolio put together. She was able to determine what pictures she wanted, what events she had participated in. It demonstrated her ability to use technology. And she made up such an amazing portfolio that she went to the Rotary Club and she presented it. And she basically blew everybody out of the water. She then was able to determine what environments she wanted to be in and how she wanted to spend her life, so that she was able to then get some work experiences that allowed her to do the things that she wanted to do. So giving them the opportunities to be able to say, yes, I want to do this, no, I don't want to do this, or this was hard and this was easy and I would like to be, part of that group or not part of that group, is very, very important. Financial plan?
I think the best example of a financial plan is, first of all, we all need a financial plan, don't we? A young man in our class, Brian by name, Brian asked if he could stay an extra year. His parents agreed. And when Brian turned 19, he was getting the disability pension. He now had a key to his own little apartment in his own home. He had to walk up and get his check. His parents were teaching him financial responsibility right on the spot. The financial plan is really important, and more than the financial plan, this is my personal feeling, is the financial literacy. Financial literacy is really important because there's many words that come out that the kids don't understand, whether it be a credit card, whether it be savings, checking, using the bank machine, going to the bank and the person asking if you want one that's simple interest or compound interest. I know that sounds crazy information. That's really important information for these young people, especially if they're going to get jobs. They need to know where they should be putting their money. I'm not saying that they should use the word debentures or other kinds of investments, but they have to know the basics. So with the financial plan, part of it is, yes, figuring out what it's going to cost them when they leave high school, whether they're going to go into a group home and that's going to cost something, whether they're staying at home and mom and dad are going to ask them for some support, or whether they're going to go on to a college program and whether that's going to cost, if they're going to go on their own, if they're going to be able to finance themselves for the food, how much the bus costs, etc. All of these things we have to look at with the students. But the language is really important. The young people have to know the words that the adults are going to throw at them, assuming that they know.